Hello there. My name is Ed Romero, and this is the Out of Office Chat where I talk about life outside the office. And today we want to talk about an epic Mexican mafia movie, the books I've been reading in the realm of animal spirituality, and our family trip to Puerto Rico. All right. I know it's been about a month and some change since I last hopped on this podcast, and I do apologize. I think it's almost 2 months. It's been a busy time, on top of family matters. I've had a couple conferences, client work. So it's been a little bit busy. I'm going to try to make it a little bit more regular, 1 month. And what I'm finding out is I need an outline. I have this right here, so you can see that right there in the video. I have an outline, and it helps just kind of get my thoughts in order. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and deep dive into this, the Mexican Mafia movie here, Blood In, Blood Out. So it's, I think a lot of folks, when they think of gangster mafia films, they think about The Godfather, Goodfellas, I'm sure A Bronx Tale. But there is actually a couple of Mexican mafia movies. And maybe it's a stereotype, but I think there's a lot of guys, just a lot of guys in general, they really are fascinated by this kind of crime drama, and I'm no exception. I've my favorite mafia movie is Goodfellas. I love The Sopranos. I've watched The Godfather. It's not bad. I've watched it a few times. But over the last month and a half, close to 2 months, I have been watching over and over again Blood In, Blood Out. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The acting is not great. It is actually pretty darn subpar. I don't want to say it's bad acting because there are some actors that are pretty good. But don't let the bad acting throw you off, because the storyline is pretty darn legit. That having said that, I've watched it about 10 times. I think I may have mentioned that already. And the plot, it's pretty good. It's very captivating. It's about a 3-hour film. All of it's found on YouTube. I just found out there's a 4K version of it online. I've been watching it in parts and pieces. I watched it a couple of years ago, and I picked it back up, I think about a month ago or so. I don't know why. I think a clip came up in my YouTube feed. So I watched a clip, and then my Instagram feed. So it kept coming up in my Instagram feed, and I'm like, let me rewatch it again. So it's it's a good film, and let me give you a kind of a brief overview of what the film is about. I may deep dive into some parts of it. I may just keep a couple of things out. I think what I want to do is let's kind of chop this up into 3 segments, basically the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the movie follows 3 cousins, 3 carnales, as they call them, that grow up in East Los Angeles, or East Los. Let me stop right now because I keep using the Mexican slang found in the film. So I'm gonna try not to, but it's so hard not to. It's cool. It's really cool. So it follows three cousins, right? Miklo, Paco, and Cruz. And ultimately, Paco and Cruz are cousins, or not, are actually stepbrothers, and Miklo is a cousin of, I forget, I think it's their cousin. It's their cousin through Cruz's mom. But the thing that differentiates Miklo versus Paco and Cruz is that Miklo is half Mexican and primarily white. He's Caucasian, and he looks white. So what ends up happening is, time and time again, he's kind of trying to prove himself that he's not just white, he's actually he's actually a Chicano. So and that gets him into predicaments throughout the entire movie. But right off the bat, the movie starts off with Miklo coming back to East LA after living in, I think it was Las Vegas or something like that, with his white father, and then getting into it with the boys, basically hanging out. So all the 3 of them are actually a part of a gang called Vatos Locos, Vatos Locos for life. That's what they say. And again, right off the bat, there's bad acting. And if you see the YouTube video, there's this thing they do where Miklo does, where he just does cringy gang signs, right off the bat. And it's, again, don't let his acting, fool you. The story is pretty cool. So the first portion of the film basically follows these three cousins as they are basically in the gang and navigating day to day life. Um, Paco is kind of like the more I want to say he's the rooster. I guess he's kind of the rooster. He's kind of like the dude that speaks a little bit more, speaks loudly than others, kind of like the head honcho, and kind of demands a little bit more respect than other folks. Cruz is the creative. He's a little bit more of the sensitive type in the film. And his journey actually is pretty neat as it progresses. But in the first third of the movie, they're all basically kids and innocent. They're growing up and they're just being little hoodlums. What ends up happening, because they're a part of this gang called Vatos Locos, one evening after vandalizing a rival gang's car, which is Tres Puntos, I think. Tres Puntos, 3 points. Cruz is out for a joyride after winning an award, a scholarship, and he's hanging out with his girl, and ultimately gets accosted by rival gang members, and it's pretty darn sad, because what ends up happening to Cruz is he not only gets his leg all messed up by getting jammed in the door, but the rival gang members actually mess up his back. I won't spoil how, but they mess up his back. He's in the hospital, and what ends up happening is Paco and Miklo end up vowing revenge, and in the next morning, that's what they do. They go get revenge on behalf of Cruz, and what it culminates in kind of like a showdown between these two gangs, and Miklo ends up killing one of the rival gang members from his name is Spider from Tres Puntos, and that basically brings it up for the first third. You have these three individuals: Miklo, the guy who's trying to prove himself because prove that he's Chicano because he looks white; Paco, who's the rooster, kind of the outspoken one; and then you have Cruz, or Cruzito, who is the creative. He's an artist. I should have mentioned that earlier, but he paints, and he ended up hurting his back on the day he won an art scholarship. So now, this event that took place between these two gangs, this face-off, essentially thrust them into what would be the rest of the movie, but also the rest of their lives, their trajectory. And because Paco and Miklo avenged Cruz, but a rival gang member died, they are faced with a couple of options. They get caught, and so this leads into the second part of the film. It's a 3-hour film, folks, but it goes by really darn quick, and I love the pace that it kind of takes on. So the second part of the film basically follows Miklo going to jail, Paco going into the Marines, and Cruz trying to overcome his now messed up back, the pain in his back. We're start off with Miklo because he has a pretty darn great story. So Miklo goes off to San Quentin, where there is a large Mexican population alongside, in San Quentin in the film, and I'm sure maybe in real life, I don't know. There are three major gangs. Those are the La Onda, Aryan Vanguard, and the BGAs. I forget what the BGA stand for. Black Guerrilla, something or other. I'm not sure. But they're all actually based on true gangs. They're actually La Onda, which is based on the Mexican Mafia. Aryan Vanguard is based on the Aryan Brotherhood, and the BGAs I think are based off of the BGF. I think maybe. I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm sipping on coffee as well. It's decaf coffee. So as a person who's basically light-skinned, going into San Quentin, but he's kind of Chicano, he finds himself in a predicament, right? Miklo wants to be in the Chicano gang. He wants to be with the Chicano folks, but they don't accept him because of his light skin. Now, on the other side, the Aryan Vanguard basically keeps saying, like, you belong with us because of your light skin. So the film basically follows kind of him trying to find his place within San Quentin, within the La Onda, And ultimately, it's pretty neat because he gets admitted into the gang through the execution of a rival, and it's even the bad acting persists into the prison, because there's this guy called Big Al, and Big Al is just he's kind of the antagonist, I think it's called, the bad guy, but he's such a character. Uh, it's so goofy. His acting is so goofy, but it just shows how depraved he is, as well as you just like to hate him. Um, so in addition to all that, Miklo gets introduced to not just the three gangs, but the characters within some of the gangs. So in the Onda, they have Santana or Montana. Let me just confirm really quick. Montana is a big L. Montana, not Santana. Montana, who is the leader of La Onda, as well as some of the captains in there, and that include Magic, which is actually Magic happens to be in the rival in Tres Puntos, which is the rival gang where in which Miklo killed that one guy, Spider. There's also this creepy guy named Popeye. He's kind of a low life, kind of like Big Al, but he tries to rape. Miklo, which is a little odd. But then what's odd is the movie progresses is the roles kind of no, they don't shift in terms of like the rape part or the assault part, but it shifts in terms of the authority. It's pretty cool as Miklo advances his career, his criminal career in San Quentin, he becomes more important than Popeye. It's pretty cool. And there's some other side characters. I've actually watched it so many times now. Especially on 4K. Now that I'm watching it on 4K, it's starting to see smaller side characters pop up, like Pockets. So he's part of the BGAs. It's a Black Gorilla. What's it called? The Black Gorilla, something rather. It's gonna kill me. Let me just find out. Black Gorilla Family. All right, so I don't think you need to know this, but the Black Gorilla Family, there's a couple of main characters that are pretty important. I guess in both the Aryan Vanguard and the Black Gorilla Army. But I'm starting to notice a little bit like some of the nuances in the characters now that I watched it in the pixelated version. I've watched that, now I'm watching it in the 4K version. It pops up. Pockets is one of those characters where it's like he had a fro at the beginning of the film when he's introduced in San Quentin, and then it was gone like in the third part of the film. But it makes sense after watching the 4K when it went away. He was getting a haircut. I didn't even catch that because it was weird. So Miklo gets admitted because he essentially kills Big Al. The way it happens, it's pretty. It's not gruesome, but it kind of keeps you on your edge of the seat. It's like, how is he going to do it? Like, especially with kind of like what's happening right now. And I've never been to prison. I've never been to jail. I don't know how things go down. So I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But it's pretty cool to see it progress. So then what ends up happening after that, after he kills Big Al, he basically takes on his operations. Big Al, in prison or San Quentin, he was the bookie, I believe. So because he was the bookie, he taken gambling bets from the various gangs, La Onda, BGA, Aryan Vanguard, and pay out accordingly. But now because he's dead, Miklo gets his hand on his bookie notebook and all the folks that owed him money, as well as the money that he kind of that Big Al had in reserve. In addition to that, Miklo is able to now bribe the guard that Big Al was bribing. So now the guard is in on it as well. And because he has those gambling details, he provides a lot of value to La Onda. And now La Onda is in charge of gambling within the prison. Coincidentally, and it's really cool how they do it. Again, it's the story. It's pretty intricate. Forget the acting. The story is pretty cool because La Onda at this point, I want to say they're on the bottom of the three gangs. I'll explain right now why. They're kind of like the bottom of the three gangs because the Aviers, Aryan Vanguards, and the BGAs they control the drug distribution within the gang and within the prison, whereas La Onda doesn't get involved with that. Now, what the gambling operations do is allow La Onda to build up their bank reserves or the cash reserves, so they can do things like hire more lawyers, hire more stuff, or find and buy more stuff for their folks in the prison, so on and so forth. So they're kind of building up their muscle. They're building up kind of a, I'm not sure if you call it reputation, but they're becoming stronger. So that's Miklo, and Miklo has a lot going on throughout this film, and it's I think Paco and Cruz might go by really quicker. So Paco, if you don't recall, he was kind of like the the head honcho in the first part of the film. Paco, the his introduction to the second part of the film, basically, he's at a meth lab, and he ends up getting charged. I don't know for whatever happened in the first part of the film, the death of Spider, the Tres Puntos gang member. But in the second part of the film, it opens up with him in a meth lab, or a PCP lab, some sort of lab. And it makes you think, oh my gosh, this guy strayed so far despite going into the Marines. What ends up happening, or what the audience ends up finding out, is that he's actually an undercover cop. So he's a detective. So he's there to bust the lab, and chaos ensues, and ultimately he takes it down, ends up killing, I think, the scientist's daughter or something like that. You should watch the film. Now it progresses where he's trying to go ahead and basically stay on the straight and narrow, by bringing down criminals, by making sure that he's actually contributing something to society. And this is all probably due to the fact that after he had killed, or after he partook in the killing of this rival gang member, he went off to the Marines. Now, Cruz, I will say, probably has the saddest story of all this, throughout the entire film. Now, Cruz, remember, he was the creative, he was the artist. He painted, and he got a scholarship for college. But because of the assault that he received, in the first part of the film, what ended up happening was the rival gang member picked him up and dropped him on a hydrant. Pretty sad, and that ended up messing up his spine. So because of that, he's in constant pain, and so he has to turn to drugs to ease the pain. But unfortunately, what happens between the first and second part of the film, as it transitions, because he's a drug addict, because he uses, I don't know if it's heroin or something like that, he shoots something up in his arm. But his younger stepbrother, who happens to be Paco's, I think, biological brother, he gravitates to him a lot throughout the entire film. It's really sweet. Cruz actually looks out for Juanito. That's the little brother, and Juanito idolizes him. Even going as far as just following him, seeing what's going on. It's very sweet. But unfortunately, what ends up happening during this time period, as his kind of story progresses, is that Juanito, because he idolizes him so much, he ends up overdosing. Cruz, after blacking out, shooting something up and blacking out, Juanito finds the needle and, trying to mimic him, sticks it in his arm, and overdoses. So, and that part is so darn sad. It's so darn sad. I won't, go into too much detail, but, it's pretty sad. So what ends up happening there is that it creates a void between Cruz, Paco, and basically an entire family. So Cruz doesn't really see his mom or dad at all. And it goes on years and years where he's basically detached and he's just using drugs. He's still painting, and he was on the verge of becoming a prolific painter, like a really, a career artist. But the drugs unfortunately got in the way. And so that kind of brings us up to kind of this second part. The third part, I don't want to ruin it for you. I might, watch it. Watch it if you want. So I might drop a few spoilers. I'm sorry, but it's darn good. And even after watching it like 10 times, I still get, I still am in awe about how well all this is executed. So the third part is basically Miklo proves himself and he gets adopted into the gang. Not just adopted into the gang, but he actually becomes a leader, one of the members of the council. But as what ended up happening was he got his parole, right? He ended up getting his parole out in the real world. So he got out of prison, but he just couldn't stay straight. And then he ended up back in prison. And now there's a rift between Paco and Miklo as Paco shoots off Miklo's leg. It's crazy, right? So he ends up going back to jail. And then now everyone is kind of like, some of the folks that they grew up with are looking at Paco like, how can you do that to your own cousin? So Miklo's back in jail, right? He was only out for like, it seemed like less than a month. He was only out for like a month, but he ended up going back to jail, unfortunately. And now he's basically in the middle of a gang war in prison. And this actually spills out into the streets of Los Angeles. And now at this point, the third part is basically how Miklo navigates the gang war, and it's pretty cool because you hear all this dialogue, and it doesn't really click what all this really means, right? So they're part of La Onda, and Miklo cares a lot about La Onda because that's now his family. His other family has disowned him, and he wants to do everything he can for this gang, but they don't want to get involved in the drug trade, and that's a big part of the third part of the film. So there's an individual called Carlos who wants to introduce drug trade. He has a connection within prison who can introduce him to really good, I guess. I have no idea what it is. It's drugs, really good drugs. So no one, La Montana, who is the leader, he doesn't want his people to get involved with that, so he declines his offer to kind of like help protect Carlos as he distributes the drugs. But Miklo and Magic's a character. I think Magic's funny. So him and Magic, basically, they swear to each other that they're gonna look after one another, and they basically try to go over Montana's head on doing what's best for La Onda. As the third part progresses, the gang war intensifies to the point where they have Montana going out to another prison to bring peace to that prison. But en route, unfortunately, he gets killed by a BGA member. And so that even intensifies the war even more so. So Paco comes in along with the gang coordinator to kind of put things at ease, talk to Miklo and just kind of put things at ease. And eventually they do. They put things at ease, but there's something sinister afoot. So what Miklo does is that dude, he basically partners up with the BGA because the BGA say they didn't do it. And then it's the Aryan Vanguard because the AVers want, the black and Latino populations to basically just butt heads and kill each other. So the leaders of the BGA, which is the black gang, and then La Onda, Miklo, who's the leader of the Latino gang now, they call it a truce, but they basically end up massacring all the leadership for the AVers. And in a twist that when initially I saw it, I didn't understand it, but after watching over a couple more times, I was like, holy crap, that's nuts. La Onda ends up massacring the leaders of the BGA. So they double crossed them. It's crazy. So at that point, it lets La Onda be like the strongest gang in the prison. Paco's angry at Miklo for, being used. And then they decide to split up La Onda. But even Miklo is like, they're actually making us stronger because they're sending us who are basically war hardened, and they already have like bank assets or whatever, cash reserves, go into different prisons so we can start up their chapter of the gang there. And it basically the movie closes out. Well, not the movie, but the last scene with Miklo is him talking to Paco saying, you're a part of, you're always going to be a part of me, even though that, I went to jail for you and then I lost my leg for you. That's another part. I didn't mention this. He lost a leg. Miklo, he lost a leg because Paco shot him You know, like he shot him and his leg is gone. Um, but like what ends up happening is Miklo saying like you're gonna always be a part of me. So the movie ends with Crucito coming back in the mix. Before the end of the movie, Cruz is the Dia de los Muertos. The entire massacre of the aviators as well as BGA happens on Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead. And Cruz is at the gravesite of Juanito, offering up La Ofrenda. I think that's what it's called. And the offering. And he basically makes amends with his family, including Paco, his mom, his dad. But at the end of the film, it looks like he cleaned up a little bit, and he's actually, I guess there is this river or this kind of viaduct in LA that's pretty popular. It's pretty much dry at this point, but you might recognize it. It's as if there was once like an artificial river that ran through it, and now there's just curvatures that on both sides. I think it was in the Terminator 2 where Arnold Schwarzenegger on a motorcycle jumped into it. It was really cool. So he's there, Cruz is there with Paco, and they kind of make amends as well because they had a falling out because of Juanito's death. And they're at a mural that Cruz had painted of it was Miklo, Paco, and Cruz, all of them just being goofs, right? And Cruz just talks about what it is to grow up there in East Los Angeles, and he basically encourages Paco to forgive himself for doing what he did, or what he's holding over his own head, in regards to Miklo. Because, I mean, you look at it, because Paco had the big mouth. It's one of it's his fault that, and he liked to egg on Miklo. It's his fault that Miklo went on to kind of kill this gang member and be sent off to prison. It's also his fault that he actually blew off Miklo's leg. And so he kind of, I guess he always felt guilty about it, and he kind of put his, what it sounded like to me, put his Mexican or Chicano part of him aside and kind of viewed it as the enemy. Cruz was advocating for like, just embrace who you are and kind of forgive yourself, right? So I thought that was pretty neat. It was a good ending. I liked it. And Cruz intensity, the acting from Cruz is probably the best out of the three. Paco's acting is not bad. Miklos is horrible. Miklos is bad, man. But again, I think this is one of those examples of like, you can have bad acting, but if you have a story behind it, it can make a movie phenomenal. And this is one of those rare instances. So Cruz, though, his speech is on point. I mean, he's so passionate. I really loved it. So, I mean, that's the entire film. I've been watching it for like a month and a half, I really enjoy it. I want to take a break. I think hopefully after this podcast comes out, I'll take a break and focus on other stuff. I don't know. I always have it in the background. There's a lot of great one-liners out there. Popeye was a creep. What does he say? So they call tattoos, because they all have tattoos, and they call it placas. Placas are like license plates, right? And then when he gets introduced to Miklo, he's like, "Where'd you get that placa, little bo peep?" And I thought it was hilarious. And there's a lot of things like Big Al. He's talking to Popeye because of something, and he's talking to Popeye, and he's like, "Popeye, don't be your sore loser." And it's just like, it's over exaggeration in acting and like just what they say, but it's funny. It has its moments. I definitely recommend watching it. It's a 3-hour film, but it's on YouTube, free. It's a good just hang out, watch it. If you do watch the 4K version, it just ends up cutting out after probably like 2 hours in, which kind of sucks because the last hour is just drama nonstop, like just nonstop action. It's great. But I mean, you can always switch to I think there's another channel that has the full length as well. Definitely encourage it. It's a good movie. I've watched other, like I'll end up with this movie. Now, as far as what else I've been watching, I have nothing prepared, but what did I watch? I watched The Gladiator. That was a good movie. I really enjoyed it. I watched it in parts. I'm like in the middle watching, Guardians of the Galaxy, Part 3, Volume 3. It's not bad. A lot of people were saying it's a horrible movie. It's not like a great movie, but it's also like, it's entertaining. I enjoy it. In addition to watching that, I watched a stand-up show with or stand-up special with Ralph Barboza. I think Ralph Barboza. Ralph Barboza. He's I think a Texas boy. So he's a Mexican Texas guy, and he's funny. He is a hoot. We saw him live a couple of months ago. I really enjoyed it. So my wife and I were pretty darn excited about watching his stand-up. So we've been watching that, and I think that's it as far as it goes with movies. Now, moving on to the books, and this should be a pretty quick segment as well. So we'll see how it goes. So I think last time we talked, I was reading Walking with Grandfather as well as a sci-fi book called Exhalation. Exhalation I couldn't finish. Walking with Grandfather I did. It was phenomenal. But that had me kind of like looking into other aspects of Native American, I guess, culture. And that led me down the way of animal totems. I will tell you what animal totems are after this sip here. That's decaf because it's 4:30 at night. If I had caffeine, I'd be up all night. All right. So, animal totems. I've been listening to kind of like spiritual belief systems over the last several years, and one of the things that I've heard are like the significance that animals have in terms of spirituality, and I think this is the best. The best representation is maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it's alebrijes. So, for those of you that don't know alebrije is a spirit animal, or basically an animal that follows you. Well, because alebrijes I feel like are synonymous to animal totems. They're basically guides. They are animals in the real world, but also on a spiritual level. So, what I've been trying to do is get a better understanding of animal totems. And alebrijes. There aren't a lot of books about alebrijes just because culturally speaking, it is more like towards Latinos, specifically the Mexican culture. I think alebrijes were made popular in the 1930s by one Mexican, I don't know, artist or a book writer, author. But animal totems are actually pretty darn. It's pretty prevalent in Native American culture. So that being said, there are a lot more books about animal totems than alebrijes, but I do believe they're the same. So I say all that. Now I don't say spirit animals because I heard somewhere where like it's offensive to Native Americans, spirit animals based on Native Americans' relationships with things at a spiritual level, animals being one, and then objects being another, as well as other items or other things, entities, I guess. So I ended up buying two books on animal totems. This one's called Totem Animals, the only book you'll ever need. And it's a good book because it's a brief introduction into what they are, and how you can become more attuned with your animal totems. It's pretty cool. I really like it. I think most of this book though here it's pretty thin. Most of the book here is about like what each animal totem means or each animal means. But there are some like insights into like identifying your animal totem, how to commune with it, what it means, or what it means, but like strengthening your connection, and even to the point where what your child's totem animal might be. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I liked it. I liked it a lot. This other one here is called Animal Speak. So, Animal Speak, the spiritual magical powers of creatures great and small. This one is a little bit thicker, a lot thicker. So you see this bad boy here? I'll put these two side by side. So you see? It's much thicker. And it is way more thorough. And it's totally fine. I think the first one was pretty good. But this one is way more thorough. And it just goes into, let me just go to the table of contents really quick. All right. So it's divided into a couple of parts. It's divided into part one, symbols in the natural world, and looking at the kind of the various roles that nature plays on a spiritual level. Again, communing with the spirit totems, and the mystery. Oh, this is pretty cool. I like this a lot. So the mystery of and magic of predator and prey. So this is really cool. I like that. I like that chapter because we often think that being a predator, being a predator. I think being a predator and or a prey denotes whether you are strong and whether you're unique. You are weak, I should say. Um, but the book here makes a case to say that it's all natural and there's nothing wrong with being one or the other, given that there's a relationship with or the need in I guess in the ecosystem in the natural world to be a predator and or a prey. You know, so an example it provides here is that there's a snail in the Florida marshlands where it's very popular amongst I think it was a bird or something like that, and the bird itself, since the Florida marshlands have been decreasing, the bird itself has gone endangered. So although the snail wasn't a massive, I guess, consideration or something like that was looked at as in awe, but it was a big part of the ecosystem. So then I'm still reading this, and I'm trying to figure out like what it means. And the reason why I started to read up on this is I started noticing, over the last several years, I'm trying to detach a little bit more from like always having headphones on. I have headphones on right now, but that's because I'm recording. But I try not to have it on if I'm at work and I'm going from the store to the bank and, back and forth. I think I could do a better job here when I'm working on SEO by detaching. And I typically have my phone on me, right? I typically have my phone on me as I try to look at blood in, blood out. But I want to be a little more, cognizant of the natural world. So I picked up these two books, and so far it's pretty good. I don't know that many folks that are into it as well. And it's one of those topics where you broach, you gotta broach a little bit carefully because people might be like, oh, he's a little bit, wooish, and that's totally fine. I don't speak it out to everybody, but I think it's really cool to learn about it. It makes you also see animals in a different light. Now, I am not a vegan or a vegetarian by any means, but I have heard of individuals who kind of understand the relationship with animals and decide to go vegan, and that's totally fine. But I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just going to keep reading and see how it goes. I really do like it a lot. One of the things it encourages you to do is just say it out loud and say it to yourself. It's like whatever my animal totem is, send me a message. And I actually did. I can't share it, I can't say specifically, but I did end up getting a couple of messages. It sounds silly, but sometimes the messages themselves, they are, they can, depending who you ask, depending who interprets it, it can be nothing, but at the same time, it can be a lot, right? We don't know that because I feel we're always distracted. We're in rush hour. We're listening to a podcast. You can listen to this one though. It's okay. We're listening to music. We're on our phone, social media. We're so distracted. We don't really receive the messages that are existing out there, And one of the things it talks about in these books is that, it used to be a point where there was no technology and the relationships were recognizable, where you have animals going up to primarily the Native Americans, and I'm sure other cultures as well, and being able to communicate in one fashion doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, how are you? But it's mostly like these animals are here for a specific reason, and they go off in the distance or they act and behave a certain way, and it tells us X, Y, Z. And I think it's difficult nowadays because we're so plugged in. They're so easy to go on your phone. So I don't know. And I think that really kind of leads into another segue where that goes down another avenue where I'm trying to disconnect. It's hard though. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it's easy. But you just keep trying, see how it goes. A nice sip of coffee there. All right. So that's that. I'm still reading this. This is a thick book. And they have like two parts, one for animals and one for just generic or general mammals. But so far pretty cool. My son saw the cover, which is a Native American holding what looks like reindeer antlers off into the distance, and a couple of animals in the background. So we'll see how it goes. I actually like it. Cool. So I don't have. I have a third thing I'm listening to. It's not a book. It's an audio book called 10% Happier. I'm still in the middle of reading it. I'll probably be done by the end of the week. But I really do enjoy it. So 10% Happier is it's a story of a news anchor, a news reporter for, I believe it was ABC, Dan Harris. So Dan Harris, he was a career news anchor, and he he kind of, at the start of the book, he kind of makes it a point to say that he was one of those go get 'em kind of career individuals, and he just wanted to get ahead. But at one point, he ends up having a kind of like a mental breakdown on air, and he walks through that process, kind of what that's like, and that's brought upon by kind of like his, I guess, his anxiety, growing his career, but also because he was doing a lot of drugs. Um, he states in the beginning of the book that he didn't believe any kind of spirituality. He didn't believe any kind of meditation. He didn't believe in anything kind of, I guess, feel goodery, maybe. I guess maybe is the word. But as he progresses through the book, he ends up, it begins with him going to a therapist, right? He talks about, going to a therapist, and then his therapist, I don't know if he recommends going somewhere else. But he's kind of like trying to figure out how to stay kind of like appreciating this for what it is, as opposed to going on to the next thing. So he chronicles his conversations with a couple of self-help gurus, really popular in the mainstream. One of them is Eckhart Tolle. So if you haven't heard Eckhart Tolle, I read Power of Now a couple of years ago. Actually, let me scratch that. I read like the first 100 pages of Power of Now. That thing is dense. It's thick. And I got I got the first 100 pages. I was like, I get the gist of it. I'm good. And I just couldn't read anymore. It was too much. So he basically and I'm glad he brought it up. And my wife actually made a point too. Eckhart Tolle might be a little bit overrated. They offer pretty good advice. He offers pretty good advice, but it wasn't nothing practical. So then he went onto another self-help guru. I forget his name, and I forget the third guru he mentioned as well. I don't know, but essentially what he calls out is they have good advice. They all seem very present. They all seem very calm. They all seem very in control of kind of where they are. But when he pries for more practical advice, so when he understands that he has to be in the moment. But when he pries for advice, they really don't offer anything practical. I think at one point he asks the second self-help guru, hey, how do I stay in the moment? And he's like, well, you drown everything else out. Okay, well, how do I do that? Well, it's like you detach yourself. Okay, but how do I do that? And he just kept dodging the question. And at the end of the series of questions, the self-help guru was like, it's like, just follow me, ping me on email, or ping my email, or send me an email, and just follow my stuff. Which is, kind of a cop out. And the way he put it, it makes kind of sense. It's a business, right? It's an industry. So self-help gurus, they get a buck for helping. So what ends up happening is he's very, what's the word? He's very pessimistic in terms of who can help him. Each person he goes up to, he feels as if, they're not going to help me. And I will give it to Dan Harris that he definitely admits when he's been proven wrong and his assumption is incorrect. Eckhart Tolle, I think, helped him to a degree. And it helped me too. The Power of Now was great. I think that was my first introduction to being present and being in the moment. And the moment is really all that matters. So, he admits when certain individuals help him, but he also admits when they have limitations. So it progresses from being, looking at these self-help gurus to, he actually ends up finding one, I think he might be a PhD at Harvard or something like that. Something rather, it's something Epstein. Not the other Epstein, the educational Epstein. And this individual, they meet up for lunch, and he basically comes off as non-pompous, nothing really not confrontational, but nothing like self-promotional. And he comes off like an average guy. And this guy ends up, they end up being friends. Harris and Epstein, they end up being friends for a while. So Epstein advises Harris to, hey, you know what? You should probably go check out, you should probably go to this retreat. And Dan Harris doesn't want to, because it sounds really, wooish. It sounds like something like there's taboo with it. And he has his, preconceived notions where it's going to be a lot of like middle-aged individuals wearing flowery material, attire, just chanting and giving love and thanks and praise to, whatever. So he doesn't want to do that. But then Epstein ends up inviting Harris to communicate or to, I guess, check out the books of his colleagues. So what's really cool is I think this individual, Epstein, he grew up, or during his time, I think it was Harvard or Yale, it was a prestigious school. Uh, as he was coming up, he also grew up with individuals that practice meditative practices. And those individuals went on to write books, but even before then, they went on to study the meditation practices in depth, going so far as going to the East, to Indian and Asian countries, to study the arts. So what ended up happening from there is they came back to the States, and not only did they write books, but they ended up getting positions, I think maybe in universities or something like that. But they ended up building up their credibility. And so Dan Harris, in this case, he kept consuming the books that Epstein recommended, one after another. And he ended up going to conferences with some of his friends. And his friends, unfortunately, they didn't really get why Dan Harris was into this. But it all basically culminates to Dan Harris actually going to a 10-day meditative retreat. And him being very pessimistic and doubtful that he'll get anything out of it. And it's the complete opposite. He actually gets a ton out of it. He chronicles essentially his experience in the first couple of days, him being doubtful that he can actually achieve anything, any kind of peace or any kind of, like, I don't know, something they can be proud of. And then at one point he gets in a room with the individual who heads up the retreat, who actually happens to be a pretty good contact of Epstein's. I think his mentor. I forgot his name. Dang, I forgot his name. But this kind of like leader, I guess it sounds cultish, but this individual that heads up the retreat tells Dan, it's like, yeah, this happens. It's okay. Like, you individuals get doubtful that they can achieve anything, but you just gotta let go. Let go of kind of your expectations of what you want to get out of this, and then things will flow through a little bit better. And that's what happens. So after that, which was like day 5 or something, day 6, everything turns around for Dan Harris on the retreat, and he enjoys it. And at this point, after he gets out, he becomes an advocate for meditation. And right now I'm still listening to it, and about 2 hours left, but he's at a point where he's outlining the various studies that exist, that outline the benefits of meditation, not just by, small, I guess, publications, but from pretty darn big, I guess, publishers. Things like, I think Forbes calls it out. A lot of major universities are calling it out. Even the military is outlining papers about the benefits of meditation to individuals. So that's where I'm at. I really like it. I'm really enjoying it. And one of the cool things about it is it's serendipitous in the fact that over the last couple of years, I've kind of been trending in that direction as well. I'm actually also writing a newsletter for my SEO brand. And I call this out specifically because, I have 2 jobs, 2 careers. I have a wife, a son. I have an extended family, but on top of that, I also have like needs, personal needs, personal hygiene needs. And that includes mental and emotional health. And so your mind can travel any which way. And, I just wanted to stop thinking about, okay, what am I going to do tomorrow? Oh, crap. What am I going to do next week? Ah, crap. I got to think about what I'm going to do for X, Y, Z. As well as I wanted to stop thinking about, I shouldn't have had this conversation like that. I shouldn't have done this, done that. I shouldn't have talked to him that way. You see, you have you're being pulled into the future at the same time being pulled in the past. And I kind of want I wanted to ground myself. I should say, ground myself in the present, in the moment, and just kind of live life as is. It's easier said than done, folks. I'm not going to lie. It's easier said than done because there's so many things to consider. And this book, Dan Harris does a really good job at outlining, like kind of the same sentiment that I have. You want to stay present, you want to stay grounded, but it's so hard to do. And I will say, if you get anything out of either 10% happier or this episode, is that breathing, monitor your breath. just make sure you practice breathing as much as you can. And I'll talk to you. I'll mention it right now. Give me one second. I'm so sorry. There's something coming through my phone. Um, Breathing is so critical because it is what grounds you. It's what grounds you in the root. It's for me. I can't tell you Dan Harris's explanation for why, but for me, I kind of started getting this sense a few years ago, the benefits of breathing. I think it was probably when my son was still in his mommy's tummy. Um, it's just you drown out the noise that's out there and you go back to the origin of life, which is your breath. That's kind of how I see it, right? I take it a step further. I don't necessarily stop at the breath. I actually begin to monitor my heartbeat. And I do that for a specific reason. If you're going through some sort of like kind of like something that's giving you anxiety or frustrating you, if you go through your breath and you're like your blood's pumping, and I guess there's a good way to combat that. You're still going to be going through that issue, that circumstance where you're either angry, sad, what have you. By monitoring your heartbeat, I felt I was able to slow it down a little bit better. Now, everyone is up to their kind of like everyone can do it like however they feel works. In terms of breathing, what Dan Harris calls out, as well as what Buddhism calls out, is monitoring your breath, but also being cognizant of your emotions, not getting upset at yourself for feeling some type of way, and that makes sense. Like if let's say I get an argument with my son, because it happens, it happens. You have a 2-year-old, 3-year-old toddler. They will try to poke, at your nerves. They will. So, and if you are like, no, don't do that, right? And then you feel bad about it, and then you feel bad for feeling like angry at them, or you feel bad because you talk to them, you kind of get mopey, you feel it. But and this is something I should practice a little bit better. And Dan Harris, he calls it out as well, is practice identifying what that emotion is in your body, right? Kind of like compartmentalize it, not to the point where you forget about it, but kind of where you observe it, right? If you're feeling angry, kind of put that into a picture frame and just observe it. Like, what are you feeling angry? Why are you feeling angry? And don't say like, oh no, that's a ridiculous feeling of being angry. Just acknowledge it for what it is. It's a point of anger. It's a point of frustration, and you can forgive yourself and move on. One of the cool quotes that the audiobook says is, each moment is a new moment to actually move on. Each moment is a new moment to forgive yourself. So that's pretty cool. I really like it a lot, and I think the book came to me serendipitously. I was on an airplane in an airplane from coming home from a conference, and I was talking to the lady next to me, and she's like, what do you do? And I explained to her, but I also explained to her kind of like my goals is I want to be a little bit more present. I want to be more present and in the moment. And then she recommended that I check out 10% Happier, and I'm really glad I did. Give me one second. Sorry, I thought I heard something there. And I'm really glad I did. It's a really, really good audiobook. Dan Harris, because he's a journalist, he's able to kind of articulate things in a way that captures your attention. It's phenomenal. Give me one second, I'm taking a sip. Definitely recommend it. All right. I'm pushing at 52 minutes. I think it's probably the longest episode ever that I've ever had. I'm going to end it with our trip to Puerto Rico. Oh, it was awesome. It was great. If you haven't been, you should go. It's really relaxing. We went in November, and the weather was top notch. It was like 80, 90 degrees, maybe not too hot. My son, my wife, and I, we just needed some time together. I think it's busy all around. And I told my wife, I think our son is going to love this. He's going to love having us around. He's going to love just, being with us, exploring. And he did. He had a phenomenal time. I will say, though, he's at an age where he's all about mommy. He doesn't want anything to do with papi unless papi can serve a specific need. And that's okay. I think it is a phase. It's hard. but it's a phase. And I'm really happy that, we all got to spend time together. We all got to just enjoy each other, enjoy this presence. And it got to the point where we're at a restaurant and my son is eating his food, no fussing, nothing. My wife and I are having a conversation and just chatting, laughing. It was really beautiful. It was so great. I really enjoyed it. In terms of what we checked out Old San Juan or Viejo San Juan. That was great because I guess those houses have been around for like 500 years. We checked out some of the forts that were out there. We did a little bit of shopping for folks in the U.S. We went to the rainforest. We checked out. I swam in a pond in the rainforest. That was really cool. And then we went to the beach. The beach. I love water. I love it so much. So I was really excited that I got to spend time in the sea. Not that far. I think as far as it got to my neck, and that's about it. Um, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy water. My son was a little bit nervous at first, but he kind of overcame his nervousness, his fears a little bit. He actually got me nervous because then he got so comfortable with the water. He was running back and forth from the beach to the point where he tripped and he would fall and the wave would come and splash over him. It freaked me out. It freaked my wife out too. So but he did enjoy it. All in all, it was a phenomenal trip. Much needed family time. We're back to the grind, but it's no worries. I got a whole bunch of great photos, great memories. And yeah, that kind of brings everything up to speed. I know I jumped around a little bit there with the movie, the books, kind of my current thought processes and goals. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope next time I have this, it won't be like a month out, and we'll see. We'll see. Well, until next time, take care, everyone.